welcome to another edition of Luke's Box Office here on CUTV. And this week on LBO we will do a review of 4 movies because it's our 4th show this season. So 4th show, 4 movies, you get the point. I think you do. And Scott Preston will be in a couple of seconds to do Mighty Aphrodite, the new Woody Allen flick. Then we will have Matthew Binks with Copycat, then Lee Boyle with an homage to Halloween, and the new Halloween movie, Halloween 6, and later I will have a movie review from a long time ago called American Graffiti. But first, here is Scott.
Thanks, Luke. 4 shows, wow, time flies. It's amazing. This week I'm doing Woody Allen's latest film, which is called Mighty Aphrodite. And I wish I knew exactly how many films Woody has done so I could say this is his 25th or so, but I'm pretty sure it's around 25. He does about a movie every year, and he's been making films since around 1970 or so. So we're looking at about 25 films, and it's amazing that almost every one of them has been great, has gotten good reviews, and this one's no exception. I wouldn't say that it's one of Woody's greatest films, but it's definitely a solid effort again. It's a story of Woody actually plays the lead in this one for the first time in a while. He's usually been playing a supporting character somewhere in there, letting other actors take the lead, but he actually is the lead character in this film. He plays a Manhattan sports writer who is married to Helena Bonham Carter, plays his wife, and she wants to have a baby. Woody's not too sure about it, but she wants to adopt. And filmmaker, I think you can see bits of their personal life in the films that they're making. Certainly, Woody's personal life has been in the public a lot recently, and so some of the comments he makes about adoption, some of the negative comments he makes about adoption in this film before they adopt, I think could be related to his ex-wife Mia Farrow's strange habit of adopting children over and over again. She has something like 12 adopted children now. You can see his personal life in the films. It's a comedy. He's sort of making fun of the situation. But they do adopt a child anyway, and Woody becomes obsessed with finding out who the child's mother is. In fact, his marriage is not going very well, and he decides that since his child is such a brilliant, intelligent, charismatic kid, that the mother must also be a wonderful mother, and that if he could just meet her, maybe he could hit something off and leave his wife. So what he does is track down the mother, and it's great because it's kind of a departure for Woody. Where he's going back to some of his older films. There's a lot of comedy, a lot of slapstick, and there's a great slapstick scene where he's in the office trying to find the files on the adopted mother while the secretary leaves the room. He's bumbling all over the place, and it's totally reminiscent of its earliest films. We haven't seen Woody do slapstick in at least 10 years. In Broadway, Danny Rose, and before that, not since the early 70s. So you can see a real trend in the last few films of Woody's that he's going back to some of his earlier comedy. There's also a lot of sexual innuendo and references, dirty jokes, and language and stuff that comes right from his earlier films. So it's a major change in Woody's career in the last few years, back to his old self, getting less serious and more comedy. And I think that's great. I think that's a nice change. But I must say that the film is not as deep or as complex as some of his other great films from the 90s, like Husbands and Wives and Crimes and Misdemeanors. So in that sense, it's not a great Woody Allen film, but it's a pretty good one. And overall, I guess I have to give it a 5 out of 8, Luke. That's a good rating, but not a great one.
Good. Then people can go see it on during the afternoon or on a
matinee or a cheap night.
Cheated.
Definitely good film. Worth going to see.
Good. Mia Farrow has 12 children?
At least 12 adopted children, yeah. At
really?
least, homeless children and people like all different races, ages, anything from, I think, 6 to 22, something like that. She was on David Letterman a few weeks ago talking about them.
Really?
And I think that's something that Woody never really got used to. And
yeah. Okay. So now here's a clip from an upcoming movie.
Do it! I dare you! respect of the tribe. Discover the animal within. And answer when nature calls. On November 10th.
Nobody wants to play with me.
Ace Ventura is in Africa.
I'm alive! I'm alive!
Say uncle! Say uncle!
And Africa will never be the same. Jim Carrey.
Do I have something in my teeth?
Ace Ventura, when nature calls.
Say hello to my stinky little friend!
In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
Welcome back, and now we have Mr. Matthew Binks, the composer of the theme to Luke's Box Office, here to do a review of Copycat. Hello, Matthew.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good.
Okay, so the film that I have recently seen was Copycat, and to be quite honest with you, I really wasn't sure whether or not to like the movie or hate it after I finished watching it. It was written by two writers, and it is very apparent that it was written by two people. The film is about a woman, a criminologist, Sigourney Weaver, who goes around the country to different universities and discussing with the students about serial killers. In one such particular fateful day in her own hometown at a university, after she is finished giving a lecture, she is brutalized terribly by a serial killer who's waiting for her in the washroom. They don't ever explain to you exactly how it is that she survives, but it just turns out that afterwards, 13 months later, she's now in her home with agoraphobia, afraid to go out anywhere. And she's been like that since the attack. It also turns out that 13 months later, there have been serial killings which are now popping up around her hometown, which is San Francisco. And each murder that is taking place is exactly a duplicate of a very similar murder that happened sometime in history. Certain ones that they copy are the Hillside Strangler, Jeffrey Dahmer, the Boston Strangler, and so forth like that. And because of this, two homicidal detectives, played by Holly Hunter and Dermot Mulrooney, ask for her help in cracking down on who this serial killer is. Now, the problem that I really found with this film was not so much the actual plot. The plot was a very good idea and it had very high amounts of potential. The only problem here was that it really just had too many holes in certain parts of the film. Anytime it took place in Sigourney Weaver's house, it was a very good, top-notch, A1. The story kept you in suspense all the time. You were always wondering what happened next. The other main place where this movie happened was at the police precinct with Holly Hunter, Dermot Mulrooney. Anytime that we went to the police precinct, we were completely bombarded with these little subplots that we were really not interested about, that were completely irrelevant to the plot, and never mind that, it never even tied up at the end. So you really lost a good sense of what was going on during in the movie whenever you went to the police precinct, because it really had nothing to do to further the plot. In fact, it hindered it. So as I said, because it took up about half the story being at the police precinct and the other half was at Sigourney Weaver's house for most of the movie, I came away with a split decision whether or not I really liked the movie or hated it. Because it was like watching two different films at the same time. One was great, and the other one was irrelevant to what was going on. So, because of this, I would normally give it. I was thinking about giving it $4 to split it right down the middle, but because of the fact that it left me feeling that way, that which I consider a negative feeling, I'm only going to be giving this movie $3. So, I would say if you want to go see it, I'd wait until it came out on video. I wouldn't spend your money unless you were going on cheap Tuesday or Wednesday night.
Okay, video. Great.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the way I see
So
it.
how was Henry Connick Jr.?
Oh, Harry Connick Jr. was wonderful. I've always liked him in whatever I saw him. Saw him in Memphis Belle, he was great there, and I saw him also in Little Man Tate, which I liked. But this one, he was really good. The only problem I found is they didn't use him enough. They could have done so much with that character, but he was in for only in the very beginning, and then is about 3/4 of the way through the film before the next time you see him again.
I heard he had more like a bit part than
very bit part. Yet they really emphasized that in the promos for the movie, and I didn't understand that. I thought it was going to be a larger part.
Yeah. Okay. Great. That was Matthew Binks, with Copycat, and here is a clip from that movie.
The man who has killed 5 women in this city was just in your apartment. All I know to do is change your locks, tighten up your security, and pray. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Remember last week we did our show from the Mez, we were on location? Well, Lee Boyle liked that idea so much that this week he decided he wanted to be on location again. So, on location from his house, here is Lee Boyle.
It all began in 1978. Halloween, a $30,000 low-budget movie comes out. And a myth is created. The story of a young boy who kills his sister on Halloween night. Michael Myers was his name. Locked up. 15 years later, escapes to come back to haunt Haddonfield, a small town in Illinois. But the obsessed doctor, the psychiatrist who guarded him all those years, won't quit and stops at nothing to put a stop to the madness of Michael Myers. This movie, directed by John Carpenter, revolutionized horror movies. It is the first of many slasher films, more like 2000. Halloween had many sequels. Just recently, Halloween 6 came out. A good movie for all you fans, and for all those who are ready to be part of Michael Myers' terror. John Carpenter, not part of the 6th one, but the man with the genius behind the first one. Pretty basic techniques. Introduced the walking camera movement, as I call it. Used an old Ronald Reagan mask upside down for the shape, aka Michael Myers. Jamie Lee Curtis was part of the first 2 episodes. For those who wonder about Halloween 3, John Carpenter wanted to do a series of Halloween movies with different stories in each one. But because of the myth of Michael Myers, nobody was interested in this, and Halloween 3 was soon forgotten. In 1988, Halloween 4 came out. Didn't make that much noise, but scared the hell out of me. Followed Halloween 5, ended with a dark secret that was later revealed in the one that just came out of Halloween this year. You wonder what's behind Michael Myers' madness? Michael Myers is part of a genetic plan he has been created by this cult. The head of the cult is one of Dr. Loomis's, played by Donald Pleasance, the psychiatrist who tries to halt Michael Myers' madness. Yes, this psychiatrist leads the cult and has created Michael Myers. And Michael Myers guards his secret till the end. Yes, the sixth one is only for fans. It is called Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Well, it's not only for the fans. It's also for those who are brave enough to experience the madness of a myth. The myth of the shape. The white, terrifying face of Michael Myers. My homage to Halloween and to the actor Donald Pleasance, whose last movie, Halloween 6, it was. These movies have terrified me throughout my childhood and throughout most of my life. It might be the end, but we are not sure. I give this movie 650. Experience it if you want to experience the madness of Michael Myers.
Now we are up to that part of our show we'd like to call movies we would like to review when they came out, but we were probably too young to do so when they did. So we're gonna do them. Just a second. Oh yeah, now. And the movie we will be reviewing this week is the 1973 masterpiece from George Lucas, American Graffiti, starring Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard, Paula Matt, Charlie Martin Smith, Cindy Williams, Wolfman Jack, with cameos from Harrison Ford and Suzanne Summers, and directed by Mr. Star Wars himself, George Lucas. Now, before I talk about the movie, I want you to think back for a moment to that last night before starting school, about 2 months ago, right? What were you doing? You might have been out at a party, you might have been on a date, you might have been moving into a new apartment, or you might have been just home watching TV. But no matter what you were doing, you always had that thought in the back of your head that it was telling you, tomorrow you'd be starting school, and that freedom you felt all through summer would now disappear, and you would have to go back to those endless months of exams and classes and uncertainty. Well, that is exactly the premise of American Graffiti. The events that happened to a group of teenagers the last night of summer. In addition to being the last night of summer, for many of these teenagers, it is also the last night before starting college, which adds to the anxiety they are already feeling. So they all go out to have a good time and contemplate what life will be like once school starts. Now, the appeal of this movie comes from the era in which it was set. It is set during those 10 or 15 years where that little country south of our border, called the United States of America, was still innocent. And the youth of America was going through a liberation, especially with the arrival of rock and roll. The era is the 1950s and early 1960s, the time where all Americans were rejoicing because World War II was over, and they had won the war, and they were still alive, they were free, and life was great. It was also before the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which in some way destroyed that innocence that America was living at the time. So during those 10-15 years, people felt free, which is exactly the feeling you get from watching this movie. You watch the teenagers of the time as they get into their great-looking cars and go cruising, which is the main focus of this film, the fad of cruising, meaning spend all night driving your car down the streets of your city, not because you have to go anywhere, but because you have nothing else to do, and because everybody else is doing it, and because it is fun. You go downtown just to see who's there. You drive around, talk to people in other cars through the window of your car while still driving. Pick up girls, go to drive-in restaurants. Basically, use your car as a way of socializing instead of only a way of transportation. Another element that is interesting in this movie is the aesthetics. Most of the movie is shot at night. And since this was a somewhat low-budget movie, Lucas could not afford too much artificial lighting, so he had to do with available lighting, which gives the movie a somber look that goes well with the context in which it is set. The movie is also covered from beginning to end with a great rock and roll soundtrack, not to say legendary, which really adds to the film, especially with Wolfman Jack as the DJ. As it turns out, this movie became one of the best movies of the 1970s. It made millions at the box office, got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, became one of the most liked films of the 1970s, and earned itself a spin-off TV series, Happy Days, which would rule the airwaves for 11 years. So the motto of this is, when someone who knows absolutely nothing about movies tells you, the movie producer, that your movie will not work, ignore him. This is a great movie in all respects. Everybody in the world should see this movie at least once, especially if you are into film. From a scale to $1 to $8, I give this $7.75. Now, I'm not the kind of person that gives high grades to movies just for the fun of it. This really deserves $7.75. Go see it. You'll love it. Now, here's a clip.
What did you say? Quick, hang a right.
Okay, so that's our show for this week. Join us next time for our final episode of the season. Till then, don't come knocking because the office is closed.